Was Jesus someone able to just turn someone blind to not blind?
Any question about Jesus is difficult. He didn't write any of the New Testament. His followers did. They wrote it in mythic terms. And so a lot of the claims for what Christ did, they're not really true.
Ken, do you have any psychic abilities?
I have a fair amount for ESP, so-called reading people's mind. And I'll often hear what they're thinking, and I'll actually answer them. And they'll go, what? Why are you saying that? I go, oh, I realize what that. And I go, I'm sorry, I thought you were thinking that.
Any initial thoughts about AI? Like there'll be an AI that can do your job, Ken, and can think like you and can continuously come up with new thoughts.
I'll be totally happy with that. And if it can really do what I do and do it better, I'll go out happy. My recent book, Finding Radical Wholeness, is a very good book. I don't hesitate in recommending it. I think it's the best book I've done.
How are you, Ken?
Hi, fine.
It's been, I think we last chatted maybe nearly a year ago, maybe 9, 10, 11 months ago.
Right.
How's everything been since then? What have you been focused on recently?
Well, I just got a recent book out and I'm involved in various marketing processes for that book.
Tell us about this new book that you wrote.
Finding Radical Wholeness. And I think it's basically the best book I've done. I've done 35 books, but this is, I think, the best one. And it just talks about the integral framework and the wholeness that it offers and the 5 different ways: waking up, growing up, opening up, cleaning up, and showing up. And it has specific exercises you can do for each of those to help you awaken that type of wholeness. So I think it's a very useful book. And it's very clearly written, and it's even occasionally funny. So I enjoyed doing that work.
Yeah. Since our last chat, one of the takeaways I had was sort of taking a more integral approach in life. And I remember I was in Mongolia learning about shamanism. I came back to Australia, I was reading the Bible for the first time, reading the New Testament. I was in Hong Kong going to their Buddhist temples and seeing how they pray for more money and pray for good luck in business, and just sort of seeing all these different approaches, thinking about reincarnation, thinking about how in Mongolia they think about the God from within, and really seeing all the similarities between everything. And you helped me sort of really sort of have that mindset.
Right. Well, that's good. I'm glad it helped.
One of the things that came up again and again was sort of the talk about reincarnation, the talk about how once you discover the God from within, you now reach enlightenment, and all these things seem very similar. The fact that you keep reincarnating until you hit enlightenment. What is your thoughts on reincarnation, Ken?
Um, Reincarnation is one of the very few topics that I've gone back and forth on myself. Almost all the other topics I've written about or I've encountered, I have some very specific ideas about how they can be approached from an integral perspective and so on. But reincarnation has always been, it's just difficult for me. First of all, I tend to look, as I take an integral approach to these various ideas, I tend to look at how many other civilizations have embraced a similar idea. And reincarnation is not that popular on a worldwide basis. So in Zen Buddhism, for example, even though as a Buddhist sect, it does believe in reincarnation and karma as a holdover from your previous life, but it really doesn't emphasize it very much or talk about it very much or make a big deal out of it. It's almost like it's sort of embarrassed by it. It's kind of pushing it under the rug. And the school that pushes it mostly is Tibetan Buddhism. And that in part came from its interaction with the Bon religion, which is a shamanic tribal religion from Tibet. So when I think about it from that angle, I tend to downplay it. But then when I meet people like the Dalai Lama or some really impressive folks, and they very fully believe in reincarnation, and they'll talk about it and talk about how it can impact your life and so on, then I tend to reevaluate it and sort of notch it up a bit on the believability scale. I do believe that when we die, that our big mind goes on. Now, big mind is not small mind. Big mind is not ego. It's not the separate self. Big mind is the entire universe and the consciousness of the entire universe. And so that's not really, it's almost not reincarnation, because Ken Wilber, when big mind goes on, Ken Wilber doesn't necessarily go on with it. Ken Wilber would be one of the things you would think is left behind, because big mind is beyond the separate self, beyond the small mind. But that would be my position right now, is I do believe that big mind goes on because consciousness is eternal or is timeless and is ever present, and therefore could be expected to be ever present wherever it goes when I die. And so I believe that, and that is the same big mind, that it will be reborn, but it's reborn in every sentient being. It's present in frogs, lizards, deer, antelope, rabbits. I mean, so that's not me, although it is my big mind, because it's every person's big mind. The overall number of big minds is but one, or as Erwin Schrödinger, the founder of quantum mechanics, put it, the overall number of consciousnesses is but one. Consciousness is a singular, the plural of which is unknown. And that's exactly right. There is only one big mind, and it's identical with spirit or Godhead or Tao or Brahman or ultimate reality, however you want to view that. So that's my generalized stance to reincarnation.
When you talked about the big mind, I was thinking of this quote, I believe it was from Ram Dass, where he talked about getting into a state of awareness, realizing your emotions, and that my awareness is the same as your awareness. Is that similar to what you just talked about, how everyone has the same big mind?
Yes. And it's one of the realizations that an enlightenment experience tends to carry with it. So if you're walking along in the woods and you see the sun and you feel the earth on your feet, you see all the trees in the woods, and then you have just a spontaneous spiritual experience, a spontaneous satori, a spontaneous enlightenment or awakening, you'll tend to, what will cross your mind as an actual object of thought, or there are several things that you realize. One is that, wow, something has happened to me. I'm in a different space. Two, what is the space? Well, I'm one with everything. I'm one with the entire universe. I don't see the sun. I am the sun. I don't feel the earth. I am the earth. I don't see molecules, cells, and organisms in each and every tree, because I am the cells, molecules, and organisms in each and every tree. And one of them is, well, this is the same consciousness that every human being has. And not every human being, every sentient being has this. And I believe, with many great Western philosophers who are called panpsychists, although I don't like the word panpsychism, because what a panpsychist believes is that every single event in the universe has a small degree of awareness or consciousness. Whitehead called it prehension. So even an electron has a little bit of prehension, neutron has a little bit of prehension, proton, a little bit of prehension. And when those all come together to form an atom, the atom itself has a little bit of atomic prehension. And then atoms come together to form molecules, and molecules have a bit of molecular prehension. And then molecules come together to form single cells, and every single cell has a bit of cellular prehension, or cellular awareness, or cellular consciousness, whatever term you want to use for that. You have the realization that that prehension is in everything, including every other person has the same oneness with big mind or big consciousness, or however you want to word it. And that's one of the reasons that having an awakening experience is such a life-changing experience. It alters so many of our fundamental ideas about the world. Like before we have an enlightenment experience, we think I'm separate from everything out there. I can see everything out there, but I'm not one with it. The same thing as the flock of birds flies by. We don't feel that we're one with all the birds. We feel, oh, they're just up there, separate from me, doing their own thing. And the same with the earth. We don't think that we're one with the earth. We think we're quite clearly separate from the earth. And we also believe that other individual human beings have a self-sense, a separate small ego, but they don't have a big mind, this one with everything. But all of those ideas are wrong. They all apply to the world of Maya, or the world of illusion. And when we wake up, it's called waking up or awakening for the precise reason that it literally is just like you're waking up from a dream or even a nightmare, and you come to reality and you go, whoa, thank God, that dream wasn't real. Well, that's the same feeling you have when you have an enlightenment or an awakening experience. You come out of this state as if it were a dream. And you go, oh, thank God, I'm not really going to die. I'm eternal. I'm infinite. I'm ever present. I'm one with everything. And you realize those to be very real truths. And so that's why enlightenment is a good idea. I'm still slightly stunned when people ask me, what good is enlightenment? Why do you want to have an enlightenment? And I'll go, well, where shall we start? Let's take 10 things that you believe. And I'll tell you, when you get enlightenment, you won't believe one of those things anymore. And everything that you've replaced those beliefs by is much better than those beliefs. It will make you feel less suffering. It will make you feel less anxiety, less depression, less fear. It will make you feel good. It will make you feel happier. It'll make you feel more release, more freedom, more bliss. The Vedanta Hindus refer to it as Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, bliss. And being, consciousness, and bliss is what you start to feel permanently ever since you have an enlightenment or an awakening experience. And that's a very, very good thing to have.
Ever since our last conversation, I've been on that journey of trying to learn about things that you just shared. And something that threw me off earlier this week was watching a podcast and hearing a researcher say that there's a 99% chance we live in a simulation. I think the person's name was Roman Yapolowski, and I've heard Elon Musk say the same thing. And I guess the simulation does feel like we all can be inside this computer and everything is one. And
we've all seen The Matrix.
Yes.
The movie The Matrix, so we know what a simulated reality would look like.
So hearing that, for some reason, that threw me off and I felt very sad.
Well, why did you feel bad?
I felt like if this is a simulation, life is so hard, life is difficult. I can't believe that something so difficult is a game. I thought if I was in a simulation, life would be amazing and fun. But the difficulties I'm pushing myself through it doesn't feel like it's a big sense of achievement if it's all simulated.
Okay. Well, this is why, for example, a lot of the very effective and very evolved spiritual systems that whose sole aim is to achieve a satori or an enlightenment experience or an awakening experience. Like Zen Buddhism, for example, they have developed forms of meditation that basically shut down the thought process and just put you in touch with your basic present awareness. And when thought tends to drop away, they actually have names for that state of consciousness. It's like nirvikalpa awareness. Nirvi means no, and kalpa means thought. So it's a no thought awareness. When you experience that awareness directly, it becomes very simple because you're not thinking about all the complexities that you have to get involved with. And if you actually had to think about all the things that enlightenment does for you, it really would make you feel various degrees of not good. So that's very likely what you're experiencing. But believe me, the actual experience itself and the actual states you get into to have that experience, there's none of that confusion. Yet you're actually met with an increasing sense of simplicity and ease and elegance. And it's a very pleasant experience overall.
Is the goal to get to a point of enlightenment where you feel this bliss and it doesn't matter if this is a simulation or not, and whatever it is, you're just present, you're blissful, and it doesn't matter?
Well, if you're asking, is one of the points of an enlightenment to feel an ever-present bliss? Yes, that does happen to be empirically one of the direct results of having a satori, of having an enlightenment experience, of having an awakening. You do start to feel an overall bodily, mental pleasure, and it's frequently described as bliss. The Sanskrit word is ananda, and ananda can mean a whole spectrum of pleasure, but used in this context, it almost always is translated as bliss, because bliss is a sort of a very strong form of pleasure. And that's what you get with an enlightened experience. Your breathing and your body sensations and your body feelings, they all are variation on a strong, blissful background. And that's what you feel, and that's what you're aware of. And it follows you pretty much 24 hours a day. I mean, when you dream, you'll frequently be in a blissful state of dreaming. And when you wake up, you'll wake up to a morning form of bliss. So it's one of the reasons that enlightenment is so sought after in all the world's great religions. Every single one of them has at least a small sub-school that aims for an enlightenment. Christian mystics have it, Hindus have it, Buddhists have it, Taoists have it, Sufis, Islamic Sufis have it. And it's a very powerful, motivating force, because once you just even get a small taste of it, you love it. You go, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be feeling. I'm not supposed to be feeling these headaches and this sour mood and this depression. Oh, those all suck. I don't like those at all. I'm meant to experience this bliss. This is wonderful. This is great. And you do.
Another big takeaway I had from our last conversation, I remember asking you, Ken, I was like, how do you have unlimited energy? And you talked about feeling your emotions, letting them go through you. You talked about this metaphor of like a cup with sort of water bubbling up, and sort of you gaining energy from that. And that's something I've been practicing a lot, really trying to let the feelings flow through me. Feel the headache, feel the exhaustion, feel the loneliness, feel the sadness. And it's definitely helped me a lot. But I still feel those things. You talked about enlightenment removing those feelings, or those feelings will not come.
What feelings? The
Feelings of
pleasurable,
um,
positive feelings?
probably feeling of exhaustion, headaches, sadness, loneliness.
Oh, those can come up because what you're doing is you're increasingly resting in your pure awareness, in your pure consciousness. And awareness doesn't choose. Like if you just look out in front of you right now, you look at your computer screen or something, you don't choose to say, oh, now I'm going to be aware of this. Oh, it's a computer. So now I'll be aware of the computer. It just comes up, it enters your awareness, and you're aware of it. Well, as you start to reside in that pure witnessing state, all sorts of stuff will come up, particularly stuff from your unconscious will start to come up. And so that can include depression, anger, sadness, any number of unpleasant things. But the key is in every case, just be fully aware of whatever it is that's coming up. So if you're resting in your awareness and you're aware of everything that's arising moment to moment, and all of a sudden an enormous sense of sadness comes upon you. Well, don't turn away from it. Don't try to hide it. Look directly at that sadness and be as fully aware of it as you can. And even identify with it if you can. And there's people sometimes have a little bit of trouble understanding the non-dual awareness. And there's a simple exercise that it works for about, I would say 50% of the people that try this exercise, they get it, it works. And they see exactly what non-dual awareness is like. So I'm going to go ahead and give you that exercise. And it might work for you, it might not. If it doesn't, don't worry. If it does, it'll give you a hint about this idea that you are one with everything you're looking at now. And this idea was discovered by a man named Douglas Harding. He's a member of the London Buddhist Society. So it can tell you right there that he's interested in this Buddhist enlightenment or awakening. And he wrote a book on it called On Having No Head. Now, what he means by that is he says, notice that you can see every part of your body. You can see your toes, you can see your feet, you can see your ankles, you can see your calves, you can see your thighs, you can see your pelvic area, you can see the lower stomach, you can see your chest area, you can see your upper arms, your lower arms, your hands, your fingers, and both arms. But notice there's one thing you can't see. You can't see your head. If you try to see your head, all you'll see are two sort of fleshy blobs sticking out, which is your nose. But you can't see your face at all. Even if you get a mirror and you look at the reflection, well, that's not actually your head. First of all, it's not sitting on your shoulders. It's being held. It's a reflection that's about 2 feet away from you. And it is a reflection. It's not your real head. So you still can't see it. Now, I can see your head and you can see mine, but I can't see mine and you can't see yours. So Douglas Harding starts with that sort of background. But then he says, notice, however, you actually can see where your head is. So if you sort of look from this side of your face at the world out there, you'll notice that this side of your face appears empty. But if you look at this side of your face and you look at, say, the wall or your ceiling or a tree or a car or any object out there, you'll notice it's actually sitting right where you thought your head was. So if you're looking at your computer, say now, this computer is actually sitting right where your head is, and you are directly one with that computer. And you're always one with whatever you're looking at, because it's always sitting right where you thought your head was. Right. And so that's a taste of a non-dual or unity awareness. And all of your awareness is always a unity, because it's always occurring right where you thought your head was, right where you thought this big subjective self was, is every object that you're looking at. So subject is always one with object. And so that's an interesting little exercise, and you can try it anytime during the day that you want to, but it'll give you a sense of being one with everything you're aware of now. And so you can, if you just extrapolate that feeling, you can see how you're one with the entire universe. Because if you go out at night and look up at all the stars appear right where you thought your head was. And that's just, you have this big wall of blue and with little white dots in it. And they're sitting right where you thought your head was. So that can give you a sense of what the enlightened unitary experience is like. You're one with everything you're looking at. You're one with your subject is one with every object it's aware of. So did you get some sense of that?
As you're talking about that, something did click, and the thing that I thought of first was it felt like, those VR headsets, how you can put on those VR headsets and everything is within that thing right in front of you. Like you're in this game, but everything in the game is inside right in front of your eyes, and that's what I felt and that's what I thought of.
Right. Well, that's very close. That's very good. So you can get a sense about what it means to be one with everything you're aware of. And you can feel it where your head used to be, and you can see it sitting right there where you thought your head was. And it holds whether the object's miles away or whether it's, again, just your own computer screen. So that's a fairly simple way to get a sense of this non-dual unity that enlightenment gives you. And when you're one with everything, you as a separate standalone self have disappeared. So there's no separate self to get hurt. And that's why pain and depression and anxiety tend to be replaced by bliss or happiness or good feelings. And that's why Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, and bliss, is our true and always present state of awareness.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I was going to ask what the next exercise you would prescribe me, as I've been practicing the feeling of my emotions, not fighting it, letting it go through me. And I think the next exercise would be the exercise of being present, realizing that everything's one and connected. So I'll be practicing that for the next 12 months and I'll report back.
Okay.
Another concept that I learned or I picked up when you talked about how everything is one, it made me think of, I've started reading Joseph Campbell's books after our conversation, and he talks about the eternal now, Bakmak Run. He talks about how everything, God is the eternal now, and how the future and the past doesn't exist.
Right. Well, let me also try to talk you into the timeless now. The timeless now simply maintains that all of your experience is always happening in the same now moment. And so it's called a timeless now, or the now moment, because that's all that actually exists. So if you want to check it out, think of any past event you want to. and get as good a picture of it as you can. But then notice while you're thinking about that, that is not being experienced now. What's being experienced now is the image that you're thinking about that past, and that image is arising right now. That's all you're aware of, is a timeless now moment, because everything you think of in the past is a present thought. And the same with the future. Think of anything that's going to happen in the future, and notice that that thought is not happening in the future, it's happening right now. And that's all you're aware of, is a present now moment that includes the past and includes the future. So in addition to being one with everything, you're one with all time. So space and time both collapse into a unified form. And that's what you really are. And yes, Joseph Campbell writes about that. Almost anybody who writes about mysticism will write about the unification of consciousness having no head, and they'll talk about the timeless now of having no past and no future. As you focus on just the present moment, which is what you're supposed to do when you meditate, you just let thoughts go. They can come and go as they want. But you'll end up noticing that all you're ever really aware of is an ongoing, ever-present now moment. And so when you sit down and cross your legs to meditate, that's what you're moving into, is a timeless now moment. Of course, when you're just living in the present and you actually have no past, or the past you have is actually an experience in the now, then you don't have any emotions that are reactions to past events. So you stop having like depression, because depression depends upon there existing a real thing that is depressing you. But that thing doesn't exist yesterday, it exists right now. And likewise, future, if you're going to have anxiety or worry or something like that, it's always in relation to some future object that you think is real or is likely to be real. And so you're reacting to it. But when you're just practicing now awareness, and you're just being aware of the present moment as it arises, timeless moment to timeless moment to timeless moment, and you just start to realize that, it'll become a stronger and stronger realization, this timelessness of the ever-present now moment. And that's probably one of the things that mystics are most famous for, is living in the timeless, ever-present now. And that's exactly right. And that's what Buddhism, mystical Buddhism aims for, and mystical Vedanta aims for, and mystical Christianity aims for, and mystical Sufism aims for, and so on.
As I have an online education company. I have staff that I do payroll for, and as July ended, I paid everyone that needed to get paid, and my bank balance was -$5. That's how I started August. And I've been practicing staying in the eternal now, realizing that at this present moment, I have everything I need. If someone gave me an extra $1 million, gave me a bunch of food, it's not going to affect this conversation I'm having. Because as of this moment, I'm alive and I have everything I need. And I've been consciously practicing staying in that state of mind and having faith that things will work out. And if I just stay present, God or the universe will make sure that I keep living and I stay alive. Is that the right?
And you can't avoid that. So let's say you're working with some negative things that happen to you, and you run out of money, and so you can't buy food, and you start getting starving, you start getting really hungry, and that doesn't look very good. But even that is still occurring in the timeless now. You can't avoid the timeless now, just like you can't avoid having no head. You're always one with everything you're looking at. You can't avoid that. There's never a moment where you're actually split from what you're looking at, because you never have a head. The subject is always one with whatever objects are coming up. And the same is true in the timeless now. Even if something horrible happens to you, even if you get hit by a bus and break both your legs, that's still a present moment. It's still a now moment that you're in. And when you stay in that now moment, it tends to wipe out all these negative thoughts about, oh, this past thing happened to me and I'm depressed about it. Or, oh, this future thing is going to happen to me and I'm worried, sick, and I'm anxious about it. When you stay in the now moment, even if you're sitting there with two broken legs and you're really in the now moment, you're not going to have past depression or future anxiety. They just don't arise. And even if they did, they would arise in the now moment. So, I mean, in both of the examples we've given, having no head, which is a unity with all space, and having no time, which is a unity with all time in the timeless now, we see that every person, even if you're unenlightened, even if you've never heard of Buddhism or Taoism or Hinduism, you're still one with all objects that you're aware of right now, because you always don't have a head, and you never will. And you likewise are only aware of the present now moment. That's the only thing that enters your direct and immediate awareness, is this timeless now. And so we see how, whether you realize that or not, if you don't realize it, you're not realizing it in the timeless now. And if you do realize it, you're realizing it in the timeless now. So we can see that both your headless condition and your timeless condition are ever-present states of awareness. You can't attain them because you never lost them. And that's the basic message of spiritual systems like Zen Buddhism. Zen masters are very good at coming up with what they call koans, which are usually simple stories. It's told about a student asks a Zen master, for example, a famous one is a student asks Josh, who is a famous Zen master, does a dog have Buddha nature? And every good Buddhist knows that all sentient beings have Buddha nature. They all have part of big mind. They all have an ever-present awareness. And so the correct answer to does a dog have Buddha nature is yes. But what Joshu says is a very loud, resounding moo. Now, moo is Japanese for no. So the koan, the question is, why did Joshu say no? And there's a definite answer to that. And you have to go away and meditate on it until you become, the steps you go through, the stages of meditation are, and these are actually the steps that were sent me by a Zen master who I wrote to, actually during the 60s. I'm a boomer, I grew up in the 60s. There was a big influence into America of Zen Buddhism, in part because there was also a psychedelic craze. And so people knew that you could have these extraordinarily wild experiences being one with everything. And when they found out that that was what Zen Buddhism was all about, they sort of got involved in that. So when I first found out about Zen Buddhism, I started reading all the books I could find on it. And I found that the founder of Zen Buddhism, a guy named Bodhidharma, he used to pass on to his successors a copy of what was called the Lankavatara Sutra. And the Lankavatara Sutra is a sutra, of course, is just a Buddhist term for scripture or like a Bible or a meditation text. It's a written document that is held to be very, very profound and very truthful and very useful on your path. And so and it's a very difficult sutra. And so I got it and I just read it, devoured it. And then when I found out that there were several Zen masters in America, I was about 13 or 14 at the time, but I started writing every one of them saying, look, my name is such and such, and I really want a koan. I want to know if you will assign me a koan. I know I'm not there, but I can guarantee you I'm very sincere and very interested. And to prove them, I would write out my summary of the Lankavatara Sutra. And it was always like 6 pages or 7 pages. It was an enormously long dissertation, but this was the sutra that was most identified with Zen, and I wanted to show them that I really got it. You can depend upon me. And actually, one of them that I sent it to, who's a very famous Zen master, he agreed to give me a koan, and the koan he gave me was Mu. Does a dog have Buddha nature? No. And he said, so there are 3 steps to solving Mu. Write me when you get to the second step. Now, the second step happens to be the hardest step to get to. So I think he might have, at least in the back of his mind, thought, this will get rid of him and he won't bother me anymore because he'll never get to the second step. But the first step was, when I concentrate on Mu, all I am aware of is Mu. So that's when you sit down and you start meditating, you just think, Mu, Mu, Mu. And you only think Mu. When I concentrate on Mu, I'm only aware of Mu. And the second step is, when I concentrate on Mu, there is only Mu. Now that's a slight difference from the first, which is, I am only aware of Mu. So in the first one, the subject-object duality is still present. I'm separate, I'm thinking about Mu, but I'm only thinking about Mu. But the second step is, when I'm concentrating on Mu, there's only Mu. There's no I, and there's no other objects, and I am becoming one with Mu. So when I'm really fully one with Mu, then I'll be Mu. And then the third step is, when I don't concentrate on Mu, there is only Mu. And that means you've woken up and you know that your real identity is one with Mu. And so even when you don't think about Mu, that's what you are. You're one with Mu. So I sat, and it took me about 2.5 years to get to the second step. And then I wrote him back, and he cleared me. He said, yeah, that's right. Just make sure you finish stage 3. But I'm sure, because you've got it essentially correct, and that's the hard part, is the second step. So it might be a historical first, the assigning of a koan by mail. But I was enormously grateful to him for doing that. And that was about 50 years ago. He subsequently died, but I'll just forever keep him in my heart for what he did. So I was saying that the stages of meditation, I know those because I was given them and I practiced them. And so the first step, you're just trying to clear your mind of all thoughts and just focus on one item. You're concentrating, and it can be basically anything. You can meditate on Mu if you want to, but just hold it in awareness and don't drop it. And that will take months to be able to do that, trust me. And then once you can do that, then you'll start to realize you're becoming one with Mu. And when you actually yourself sort of disappear as a separate subject, just like if you're looking at the wall and you realize the wall is sitting on your head, you temporarily lose your subjective self and you become one with the object. That's what you're doing when you're meditating on a specific object. You just keep concentrating on it and concentrating on it, and you'll eventually merge with it. And then when you merge with it, feel what it feels like to be one with that object. And it'll be the same thing as if you realize what what does it feel like to be one with this computer when I don't have a head? And then you can just let it continue to sort of seep in, and sort of move in sort of stage 3. But those are, when you're doing those kinds of processes, you're aware of negative thoughts and emotions arising, but you're not paying attention to them. You're just paying attention to the object you're focusing on. And so maybe that's mood. So if you get a sense of depression, you can, first of all, just be aware of it, acknowledge it, let it go, and then go back to focusing on mood. And so the more you do that, the more those negative thoughts and emotions will stop arising entirely as your concentration on mood grows stronger and stronger. Anyway, I was just going to run through that so you can see what an ongoing practice of that would be like.
Do you still set time aside to meditate each day, or do you just meditate throughout the day as you're going through life?
Depends on where you are in the 3 steps. In moving from the first step to the second step, you want to pick at least, if not every day, you want to pick, like, maybe set aside a weekend and meditate all day Saturday and all day Sunday. And then during those periods, you want to just hold on to the object that you're meditating on, or whatever it is. And you want to do that all day. When you go on a so-called Zen retreat, which is called a sesshin. Sesshin is Japanese word for concentrate the mind, and that's what you're doing. You're supposed to even think mood while you sleep. You're at least supposed to try to do that. And you will find that, particularly as you get towards the end of the first step and the beginning of the second step, you'll find that there are occasions that you will awaken in a dream and find that there's just mood, and that's all you're aware of. That shows you sort of the type of terrain you have to cross to get out of your ordinary illusory mental state and into a non-dual, unified, enlightened state. You have to smash through your dreams. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
When someone sort of hits enlightenment, unlocks the God from within, is there a difference for what death is like for them? For example, if someone's enlightenment versus someone that's not enlightened, when they die, does a different thing happen, or do people die the same way?
Well, this also ties into my thoughts about reincarnation, because the acknowledged best book on reincarnation and the stages of dying is called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And in Tibet, they actually read sections of this book to a dying person. And so it will help them take up their certain meditative stance that they're going to want to take up. And it'll also walk them through the stages of dying, because in the entire yogic tradition, whether Hinduism, Buddhism, or Taoism, there are stages called chakras that, like, there are 7 main chakras that go up the spine, through the head, and out the top of the crown. And those are stages that Kundalini, which is the name of enlightenment energy, it'll actually transfer when you first awaken Kundalini at the early stages, stage 1 meditation. When you awaken Kundalini, it appears, actually looks very much like a serpent, and it's called the serpent power. And it'll rise up from your first chakra, which is at the very base of your spine, to your second chakra, which is in the genital region, to the third chakra, which is right below your navel and your upper stomach, to the fourth chakra, which is your heart chakra, to the fifth chakra, which is your throat throat chakra, to the sixth chakra, which is in your forehead, to the seventh chakra, which is the top of your crown. And it'll, as it continues going, enlightening, it'll pass through the top of your crown and up and blend with the entire sky. And you'll feel one with the entire universe. And so if you have practiced any of those types of practices while you are alive, then when they start to occur in the process of death, you'll recognize them. That's if you've practiced them while you were alive. So if you haven't practiced them, you'll be seeing them for the first time, and they'll likely confuse you a little bit. It might excite you at some stages, might depress you at other stages, but it's going to be a fairly novel experience because you're experiencing it for the first time. But if you practice any of those dream yogas or koans, practice any of those sorts of practices while you were alive and you've gone through all those stages, then when they actually happen in death, you'll recognize each of them. And you'll just go with the flow and meditate on them, which is to say, you'll just be aware of only them, and they will be one with you. You'll realize them in your headless state. And so there's a very real difference in whether you've practiced this while you're alive or whether you haven't practiced it while you're alive. And that's why I recommend that people practice it a bit while they're alive. You can buy books on this now. They're all over the place. But you can get a book on dream yoga, which will actually help you practice meditation in the dream state. And it helps you develop an awareness that will be aware of your dream when you're in the dream state. So you can buy books on dream yoga, on Kundalini yoga, on they even have books now that have the answers to hundreds of Zen koans. Like another Zen koan is, what's the sound of one hand clapping? Now, most koans, of course, don't make rational sense because what they're trying to do is shut down thinking, shut down rationality. So they'll ask you questions, and of course, you'll start to try and figure them out by thinking about them, but that won't work. And so you'll find you sort of throwing away thought more and more until you get to a nirvikalpa or no thought state. And when you get in that no thought state, you become one with your object of meditation. You become one with Mu. And when you become one with Mu, you move to the second stage. So that's the sort of long and short of that.
So on the opposite end of reincarnation, death, I guess there's like birth and past life. I've been noticing recently that I'd be having these feelings of intense love, or feelings of anger, and they're not tied to my current life. To me, it feels like this feeling of love for someone that I don't even know. It feels like it's something from a past Andy. Do you believe that there's a past sort of version of you and that you've experienced? I'm getting sort of residue from past Andy in today's lifetime.
Well, there is a sense in which you've done that. In other words, had experiences in some past state. But let's remember, there is no actual past. And what you're really experiencing when you have these feelings of love is you're getting closer in touch with your own big mind. Because big mind is being, consciousness, bliss, and love. And mystics the world over are always emphasizing love. I mean, Buddhism is built on compassion. Needless to say, Christian mystics very much believe in the oneness with Christ and the love that you naturally experience when you do find that oneness. Like St. Paul, and this is a perfect explanation of the state of unity. St. Paul says, let this consciousness be in you which was in Christ Jesus, that we all may be one. That's a perfect explanation. That's taking big mind, you identify with it. When you identify with it, you feel an overwhelming sense of love. And anything, what's the definition of love? Love is you like something so much, you want to be one with it. So even things that we love to eat, we say, oh, I just love ice cream. Well, that means you're going to eat it and become one with it. But that's what love is, the state of becoming one with something you love. And usually it's your mate, and you feel sensations of being one with your mate. And that's will exude a sense of love. And so what you're feeling is you're getting closer and closer to your true self, your real self, big mind, Brahman, Atman, Buddha nature. And the closer you get to that, the more you're flooded with love. And that's happening in the timeless now.
Yeah, so when I'm playing guitar and I'm singing, that's when that feeling sort of comes up. It's like this feeling of love for this person that currently doesn't exist, this person that isn't in my life right now. I look at all the family and friends, people I know in my life, and it feels like there's either this soulmate that's yet to come into my life or has already come and gone. Do you believe in
well, remember, what it really is your own big mind, your own true self coming down and infecting you, influencing you, becoming one with you. And so you're going to notice it. And as you think about it, because you can't really see it, you think, oh, this must be something that happened in the past. Because I trying to think of all the people I know now, and I can't think of anybody that's coming inside me and making me love, but that's what it feels like. So it must be some old ancient teacher or something. Well, no, it's your own present teacher. It's your own present big mind, increasingly pushing against you. And you feel that as a love, almost a pressure of love. And it's trying to get out. And so you can just start, when you're practicing awareness, just practice a loving awareness. And so and the love part will actually help you become one with what you're being aware of more easily. And that's what you want to do. Of course, as you practice a meditative awareness, is you want to practice getting in a headless state or a oneness state. And if you interpret that love as an ever-present force in your own big mind, then you can tap into it and let it flow. And as you let it flow, let it help you become one with everything that you're aware of.
As we're talking about love, the thing that comes to mind is sort of finding a partner, finding like a soulmate, and if a soulmate even exists. But throughout this conversation, I think the thought of being present, loving yourself, just being loving in the present, you can get to a point where there's that craving for another person just disappears, and that no longer becomes a thing that you're searching for, I guess.
Right. That's right.
Wow. One thing I heard from the Dalai Lama, he was having an interview with Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan asked him, Dalai Lama, can you heal people? Do you have, powers to heal? And he said, no, I don't. I'm not magical. And I think, most people in the world that claim to be aren't. But, maybe there are one or two people that can heal or have these powers. And I instantly thought of Jesus. Do you think, was Jesus someone able to just supernaturally turn someone blind to not blind?
Well, any question about Jesus is difficult simply because the New Testament was written about 3,000 years BCE. And that was a period that humanity was just moving through its own mythic stage of development. the stages of growing up development. I remember archaic to magic, to mythic, to rational, to pluralistic, to integral or systemic. And the mythic stage, as its name implies, believes in myths. It believes in gods, goddesses, nature, spirits, and so on. And those are truly myths. And many developmentalists call it the mythic literal stage, because myths are taken to be literally true. So whenever you're reading something about Jesus, first of all, he was a very enlightened individual. And he did realize his unity with God. I and the Father are one. But he didn't write any of the New Testament. His followers did. And his followers were all, most of them were at the mythic literal stage of development. And so they were very likely to add miracles and supernatural powers and all sorts of stuff and claim that Christ was actually doing, because they take all myths to be literally true. So things that they might add that Christ might not be able to do is restore sight, for example. I have no doubt that, well, first of all, the capacity to do paranormal events is generally called psychic powers. And psychic powers are a very low stage in the overall meditation stage of waking up. And so many of the really great enlightened beings, whether it's the Dalai Lama or whoever, cannot perform psychic powers because they're no longer at that low stage. But some people do incorporate, when they're going through the psychic level, they do sort of incorporate a way to perform those psychic powers. And they'll use it to give evidence of their enlightened higher nature and so on. But I think Christ could, well, bringing people back from the dead, that's a very, very complex miracle to perform. There's just so many things that go wrong with the body when it dies. And I mean, all sorts of organ tissues break down, and the heart just sort of gives out. And to get all of those back up and in a healthy condition would take quite an enormous amount of psychic power. And I don't myself put awakening people from the dead as a real psychic power. ESP is very real, and we have abundant scientific experiments that show that, with as one scientist put it, 100% certainty ESP exists. So ESP is possible, and I'm sure Christ could, to some extent, read his disciples' mind. Certainly, becoming one with everything is a very real possibility. First of all, you're still alive. And so you're not, all your organs haven't broken down. You're just recognizing an ever-present state of awareness anyway. So there's sort of a whole list of psychic events that I think are very possible, and in psychic events that are more miracles and miraculous and supernatural. And Jesus Christ, because he came out of a group of 12 people and then 11, all of whom were at a mythic literal stage of development. And therefore, when they wrote down their accounts of what he was doing, they wrote it in mythic terms. And so a lot of the claims for what Christ did are simply myths. They're not really true. But some of them are real psychic events. And you have to be careful not to confuse psychic with magic, because that's what people always do. Magic is the second overall stage of human growth. Remember, archaic to magic to mythic to rational to pluralistic to integral. And so people are always confusing psychic, which is a trans-egoic state, with magic, which is a pre-egoic state. And confusing those two is what I call the pre-trans fallacy. Both pre-rational states and trans-rational states are both non-rational, so they get confused with each other. And when you confuse trans-rational with pre-rational, you'll either reduce the trans-rational event to a pre-rational magical state and think that anybody who's doing magic is doing psychic, is doing some trans-rational real magic, and they're not. Or you can take the lower magic pre-trans state and confuse it with a higher psychic trans-rational state. Because again, they're both non-rational. So they're easily confused and mixed up. And then you'll think anything magic that happens is real. And if you're at that, you yourself might take up, for example, voodoo. Because magic in the real infantile state, magic works because the mind is just starting to differentiate itself from the external world. And it gets them confused. So it can't tell the difference between a signifier, a word or a symbol, and the thing that's signified, the thing that the word represents. So an example of this is voodoo. If you are at a magic stage of development and you believe in magic and you get real mad at a person and you believe in voodoo, what you'll do is you'll make a doll that looks like the person. And then because you can't tell the difference between the doll and the real person, because they haven't yet differentiated, and therefore you can magically influence them by sticking pins in the voodoo doll. So that's what you'll do, and you'll think, God, I'm destroying that person. Zap, 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 zap. And then that we eventually grow out of that because we learn to tell the difference between the word or the picture or the image or the symbol and the thing that's pictured or symbolized or represented. And then what we do is we bounce magic up to a mythic being. And all these mythic gods and goddesses, Zeus, Apollo, Mars, Aphrodite, Venus, they all have the power to form magic. And if you pray to them with fervor, or if you give a sacrifice, and almost all sacrifices in the actual magic period, the early stages of human development, some 50,000 years ago, were live human sacrifices. We all know about the Aztec pyramids, where they were pyramids with steps going up one side, and the Aztec priests would walk a sacrificial victim up the stairs to the top of the pyramid, lay them out on a slab, then cut their heart out and take it, lift it up while it's still beating, and then usually eat it. And then roll the dead body down the stairs and then roll all the way down to the bottom of the pyramid, where the townsfolk would pick it up, take it home, and make soup out of it and eat it. And they were doing that as a way to worship or give sacrifice to their gods. And if they did that, then the god would do something magical for them. Maybe make their crops grow, or if it's somebody living today, I say, get you the new car, get you the girl, get you the boy, or get you a pay raise, or whatever it is you want. But that god or goddess can do that magic on your behalf. And if you want to see what a magic miracle is like, just read the Bible. I mean, there's so many miracles on every other page of the Bible. It's just, and that's because they were all written by people at the mythic, literal stage of development. So humans can no longer perform magic, although their ancestors could. Their real ancestors could perform illusory magic, but they can't. But all of their gods and goddesses, since they're at the mythic, literal level, they can all perform magic. And usually as boons or treats or mana from heaven or something like that, that is good for the person that made the sacrifice. So that's the story on magic and psychic.
Interesting. Do you have any psychic abilities? Do you have any magic? Is there anything psychic that you've been able to pick up and perform?
I have a fair amount of capacity for ESP, so-called reading people's minds. And I'll often just sort of hear what they're thinking, and I'll actually answer them. And they'll go, what? Why are you saying that? I go, oh, I realize what that, and I go, I'm sorry, I thought you were thinking that. And then about half of them will go, well, I was thinking that. That's why I'm so surprised. Like, how did you do that? And I go, oh, well. And if they're really interested, I'll tell them. But that only happens about half the cases.
Ken, do you think it's what you just shared? Is it anything to do with a certain level of EQ and sort of observation? Like a game that I've been playing when I meet people is I've been trying to guess if they have any siblings, guess how many siblings, guess if the siblings are older or younger, guess the age difference, guess the gender, and I'll go through each step. And I've been getting better and better as I've been playing this game. Is ESP something that you feel, is it related? Is it something you can practice? Are you born with it?
Some people seem to be born with it. A lot of our scientific investigations of paranormal phenomena have found that there tends to be a genetic linkage. Not in all cases, but in some cases there is a genetic linkage. And in terms of practicing for it, all you can really do is practice a specific case, a specific type of meditation. Because it's as you increase in your meditative advancement that thoughts tend to diminish and extrasensory psychic perceptions can tend to increase under those circumstances.
And another concept I've been hearing about and thinking about is how the world is not coming at you, the world is coming from you.
Right,
And it's very similar to what you talk about, how the headless sort of
right.
everything comes from you. Does that mean like you can, my family, my friends, everyone that I know, that they're coming from me? Or are these individual people that are having a similar experience to me? Or is everything coming from me as if this is a game and everyone's just characters within the game?
Well, it's not coming from you, your small self, but everything is coming from you, your big self, big mind, your headless condition, your unitary awareness. Everything is being produced by that mind. And that's how the mystical traditions handle creation and evolution, and because they're all products of one mind. And that's your mind, because there's only one. Remember, as Schrödinger put it, the overall number of consciousnesses. It's a singular of which the plural is unknown, right? Because there's only one mind, and that one mind is one God, one Tao, one Brahman, one Buddha mind, and we all participate in that mind to a greater or lesser degree. And sometimes that mind will start to express itself in us more, and then you'll find yourself feeling love, for example, as it starts coming out, and so on. But yes, it's all coming from your big self mind.
Ken, how do you deal with people that maybe don't like you, people that say bad things? Is that coming, are those people, is it a reflection of what we think? Do those people actually exist? Is the best way to ignore them? How do you deal with, I guess, people who are not with you?
Well, the same way you actually deal with an actual dream. You recognize several things about the dream if you wake up and reflect on it. One, that you were yourself producing the dream. You were making it appear real, as something your brain was doing. You were creating all of those nasty people in that nightmare, that dream. You were making them. They have no more ultimate reality than they did when you woke up. It's when you woke up, the first thing you realize is, oh, thank God, it wasn't real. Those people aren't really here. I'll look under my bed. Nope, they're not under the bed. Nope, they're not here. And that's exactly the way external people to you right now exist. They're productions of your big mind. They're no more real than the dream figures are real, because they also are in this big dream. They're in this Maya. Maya is a Sanskrit term. Both the Hindus and the Buddhists and the Taoists use it to describe the production of the manifest universe. It's the Maya of Brahma. Now, Maya is usually translated as illusion, but it's illusion in a special sense. It's illusion that both is not real, but in some sense it is there. I mean, when you're dreaming and these bad people are coming at you, they're really real in the dream. They're real figures and they're really coming at you and you can really feel them. And that's the same way with people out there now. There are productions of Maya. But as I said, Maya sort of has two different meanings. One is pure out, it's an illusion, but it's an illusion, the type of which magicians, a stage magician, will produce, like pull a rabbit out of a hat. The rabbit is real, but is it really been in his hat the whole time? Or does he sneak it in somehow? Well, he probably sneaks it in somehow. But so Maya means creative illusion. So it's making an illusion, but it is creating a real illusion. The illusion is really there, even though as an illusion, it's just a myth. It's just an illusion. It's not really real, but it is there. So it's a creative illusion. And that's what all these external people that are coming at you and yelling at you, or even trying to shoot you or kill you, they're all creative illusions of your big mind.
One thing I've been doing over the last 2 years is I would wake up from a dream, I would quickly write it down before I forget, and I'll try to learn from the dream. So for example, like let's say yesterday I'm thinking of a memory in the past, I went on a jog and I tripped. Okay, so I'm now thinking of that memory versus thinking of a dream of me running and I tripped in that dream that I'm now thinking of. They're both the same. And one happened in the dream, one happened in reality. But when I'm imagining it, they're the exact same thing, are they not?
Yes, in a certain sense, they are.
Interesting. So that means dreams can be used as lessons. You can.
Sure. And that's where the relative level psychotherapists and psychologists use dreams in psychotherapy, because they realize that this dream is both real and not real, in the same way you're talking about creative illusions. They're not real in the fact that they're just a dream. And when you wake up, it's gone, and you'll go, thank God that's not real. But they're also real because they are actually occurring in your brain, and they're real events in your brain. And as perhaps Sigmund Freud was the first to spot, they actually carry parts of your own mind that you have repressed or tried to push out of your awareness. They show up in the dream state. And so they're representing real realities that have been pushed into your unconscious. But then when you dream, when you go to sleep and your repression barrier relaxes, they come up and you'll see them. You'll actually be aware of them in your dream. And the psychotherapist will work with you Like, for example, a common thing is to take a dream figure and you sit in a chair and you put an empty chair in front of you. And then the psychotherapist is sitting on the side of you and he'll say, okay, take your dream figure and put it in the empty chair and talk to it. So you'll go, so maybe you dreamt of a monster that was chasing you and screaming, I'm going to eat you alive, I'm going to eat you alive, or something like that. And it really upset you, and you had a nightmare, and you woke up and you were very disheveled and disgruntled and upset. And so the therapist will have you put that monster in that chair, and then we'll say, talk to the monster. And the client will usually say, well, I can say what? And say, well, like, why are you doing this to me? Why are you chasing me? Why do you want to eat me? And so the person will ask the monster why. And then the therapist will say, okay, now you take the position of the monster and sit in the monster's chair, and you become the monster and answer what you just said to yourself. So as the monster, you might say, well, why am I doing this to you? Because you're stupid and you're an idiot and you always screw things up. Why shouldn't I? And then they'll sit back, okay, now talk to it. How do you respond to that? And so you go back and forth talking to this thing. Now, what is really happening is, I could preface this by saying Freud was asked, what is it that this new psychoanalysis of yours does? And Freud rather famously said, where it was, their ego shall become. Now, most people have heard of the id and they know what it is. It's your unconscious. And the ego is your real self sense, the self ego. And what they don't know is Freud never once used the term id or ego. What he was talking about is that almost everybody represses certain aspects of their ego or their normal mind. And they just become uncomfortable with some thought, or they're frightened by it, or for whatever reason, they just push it out of awareness and they shove it into the unconscious. And then they'll start to talk about it in third person terminology. And if you're not up to date on your grammar, first person perspective is the perspective of the person speaking. So that's an I, me, mine, pronouns like that. Second person pronouns are pronouns that represent the perspective of the person being spoken to. So that's a you or a thou or a thine or something like that. And then a third person pronoun is a person or thing being spoken about. So that's a he, she, they, them, it, or its. And Freud noticed that as soon as somebody represses some part of their I ego, their first person experience, they'll start talking about it as a third person it. So they'll say, this anxiety, it's overwhelming me, or this depression, I can't control it, or this compulsion, I have no power over it. So when Freud, the terms he used instead of ego and id was he referred to the word he used instead of id. Id is a Latin term for it, but Freud used the actual German pronoun, the it. And for the ego space, the I space, ego is Latin for I, but Freud used the direct pronoun, the I. So Freud would say the it can cause the I a great deal of trouble. And what he actually said when the person said, what does this new psychoanalysis of yours do? He didn't say where it was, their ego shall be. He said where it was, their I shall become. And that was actually a brilliant response, because what happens is he realized that the person takes some part of their I space and they stop referring to it as an I, and they start calling it the third person, an it. And so what he would have people do was best seen by one of his followers, Fritz Perls, who was a big superstar at Esalen Institute, which was the first growth center in America. And by the way, a year after Esalen was created, there were over 300 growth centers in America, all modeled on Esalen. It had an enormous impact on the 60s and 70s. So Fritz Perls would have the person sit down in their chair and talk with them. And he'd say, well, what's your problem? And the person would say, well, I've got this anxiety. It's driving me crazy. And so Perls would have the person sit in the empty chair and play like they were the anxiety. And so put the anxiety in that chair and have a conversation with it. Ask it questions, talk to it. And the person might, again, say, like, what? What am I supposed to say to him? And I say, well, ask the anxiety, why are you doing this to me? Why are you attacking me all the time? I can't control you. Why are you doing this? And then he would have the person play like they sit in the empty chair themselves and play like they were the anxiety. And so he said, now answer that. Like, what? Well, you ask the anxiety, why are you doing this to me? So ask the anxiety, answer, why are you doing this to you? And says, okay, well, I'm doing it because you're an idiot, because you're stupid, because you're ugly, because you have buck teeth, because you can't do anything right, any number of things. And then the person will say, okay, now sit in your regular chair and answer what you just said. So he would have the person go back and forth and talk to this it. Now notice that when the person started, it was a third person projected, repressed part of their I space. They had taken something that caused anxiety, split it off from themselves, and started calling it an it. And they would feel it as an it. So they had no control over an it. The anxiety, it overwhelms me. The anxiety, I can't control it. The anxiety, it hurts. And so by having the person identify with that it and speak as if they were that it, they were actually re-identifying with that it. They were talking as if it were part of their I space. And so they're actually re-identifying with that it as an I, because they answered back, well, I'm doing this to you because you're an idiot, or whatever they said when they were playing, they were the it anxiety. And so that was the way that, and I call that whole process, by the way, like we have waking up, growing up, and I call that psychotherapeutic process of becoming one with your its, the process of cleaning up. Because that's often how people think of psychoanalysis or psychotherapy, is I'm going to clean up, get my shadow cleaned out. And your shadow is all of the its in your awareness. And the self that you're going to reunite the shadow with is your I space. And so you, as the I, you talk as the it. And so when you identify with the it, you'll say, well, I think that you're stupid, or I think you're an idiot. So that's why your anxiety and attacking. So they're identifying, they're doing what Freud said, where it was, their I shall become. And that was the brilliance of Freud. And his entire inner circle were legitimate, bona fide geniuses. You've heard of a lot of their names, Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, Otto Rank, and so on. And they all ended up splitting from Freud because of his overemphasis on sexuality. And none of them quite agreed with that. But they did agree there was a conscious mind, an unconscious mind, a superego, ego, id. Although the way Freud's real words, which were always the real pronouns, he would talk about the I, or the it, or the we, or the they. The way those all got changed into terms like id, libido, ego, superego, was Freud's official translator, a man named James Strachey, converted all of those to their Latin terms because he thought Latin would make Freud sound more scientific. And so they butcher Freud's brilliant insights and convert it. So you no longer say the I, you say the ego. Well, what's the ego? You actually have to define what an ego is, and nobody's really good at it. And what the hell is the libido? What the hell is the id? Well, how do you define the id? Well, it's all of your unconscious elements. What's unconscious elements? So anyway, they did a real disservice to Freud's work. And by the way, if you're curious, the way Freud really wrote, there's only one book that James Strawton didn't translate, and it's called The Problem of Lay Analyses. And it's a small book, you can pick it up, but it's written the way Freud actually wrote it. So it says the I, the it, and so on. And he writes that way throughout the book, and you really get a feel of the great phenomenology that Freud was doing. Because when he felt that there was something that was directly affecting yourself, he would say, the I, your I is affected directly by it. And you knew exactly what he meant when he said the I, because you have an I and you're aware of it. But when he said your ego, I mean, what the hell is your ego? And you knew what the id was because it was the it. And you could feel, because you already referred to your anxiety as an it and your depression as an it. And you knew what you meant when you said my depression, it bothers me. You know what you mean by it. You meant your depression. It's very clear. But anyway, that's, I always sort of enjoy telling that part of the story because Freud really was a very, very bright guy. And he deserves being the founder of one of the major forms of psychology.
When you're talking about the chair experiment and him helping people with the anxiety, I think I heard, and you talked about how people often come to you for counsel, whether it's individuals or sort of partners. When people come to you for counsel and they're like, hey, Ken, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling lonely, things are just not working out. Are there some key questions that you ask that help them unpack, or do you just simply ask, what is making you feel sad, and you just ask questions, or is there a process, or are there some key things that that get right to the core?
Yes, based upon the initial discovery work of Freud, subsequent psychotherapists and psychoanalytically oriented psychotherapists came up with a whole book of translation of what your symptoms really meant. So when you split off a part of your I self, and let's say you split off anger, and you turn it into an it, and you shove it out of your awareness so that you're not even aware that it's anger. Mostly what you'll do is called projection. You'll project your anger onto somebody else. So if I'm mad at you, let's say, but I have a great deal of difficulty with anger, I'll tend to project my anger onto you, and then I'll think you're angry at me. And so what will I feel? Well, I won't feel anger because I've already projected all of my anger onto you. But if you're really mad at me, I might feel fear. I mean, that's a logical explanation. And that's what psychotherapists have found, is that people that feel a lot of fear often have, as an unconscious it, a lot of anger. And so when I meet with somebody who has a lot of fear, there are several major things that they could be unaware of in themselves. And we can always find those by, I'll just ask them, who is it that bothers you? And what's your complaint? They'll go, oh, my boss, I'm terrified of him. And I'll sort of know, you mean you hate your boss. You mean you're really angry at him. Now, come on, fess up. And so we'll talk like that. And I'll do it very gently, so because they have, after all, shoved it out of their awareness. They're afraid of it. And of course, all they do is create an enormous amount of fear that almost everybody in the world is angry at them. And I actually have in several of my books, I'll have these lists of translations, like in a book called No Boundary. I'll have what you are actually feeling, like if you feel depression, fear, jealousy, various sorts of motivation, and I'll have those listed, and then I'll have what you're really feeling. And it turns out to be, well, it's some form of anger or some form of, you can project positive, so it could be love, and then the way that you can reinterpret that. So like when you're afraid of your boss because he's always after you, you can just, every time you feel fear coming from him, you can just reinterpret that as I'm very mad at you, and just keep interpreting that until you actually feel that translation back to its original form before you split it off and rejected it and tossed it out of yourself, made it into an it, and projected that it onto your boss. Your boss could also be all over you because he could be sort of picking on you for your self-consciousness, let's say. Let's say you have a fair amount of self-consciousness, but you are not aware of that, and you've projected that onto him. And so he's upset with your being self-conscious because you're actually upset with yourself for being so picayune and self-conscious and all of that. But you projected that disapproval onto him. And so every time you feel he's disapproving, looking at you because you're so self-conscious, you just have to literally translate what you're hearing him say and take that back, recognizing you do have self-consciousness yourself, and that you are the source of that self-condemnation. It's not your boss that's really that mad at your self-consciousness. As a matter of fact, he might actually like the fact that you're sort of self-conscious and look after all your work very carefully and conscientiously. But you feel that he's just always looking at you because he's mad and doesn't like it. And so you project this dislike onto him, and then you have to retranslate that back to its correct form. And in books like No Boundary, I'll actually have a whole page of translations of all the symptoms you can feel. It could be jealousy, it could be fear, it could be self-hate, any number of negative feelings that you get from people in your environment. And I'll have the ways to translate it back to its original form, because almost all of the emotions that you repress and project look very different when they're coming at you instead of coming from you. And when they're coming at you, like your boss doesn't like your self-consciousness, then you'll feel a reaction, a very negative reaction. And it tends to be different for every type of emotion that you project. And so that's why I'll write down the correct translation that you want to reconvert it into, so that you're re-owning what you had previously projected on to the person who's disliking you or hating you or wants to kill you or wants to choke you or whatever the negative feeling is that you're getting. You can also, like I say, project positive things. Like men often project their libido, their id, their sex drive onto women. And then they'll think the women are chasing them. And gosh, they're just all a tither, and they don't know what to do about all of that sex that's being directed at just them. And the answer is it's not. And you need to re-own it yourself and start realizing that you want to have sex with the person you think wants to have sex with you. And so you work that through, and that's in one of the translations. So that's sort of what happens when we get these unconscious shadow elements and we project them onto others and then feel that they're throwing the projected emotion at us. And if that's anger or aggression or sex or whatever it is, it can have very uncomfortable results. And so that's what you want to do is you can actually put an empty chair in front of you and go back and forth, or you can just do it in your imagination and have a conversation with whatever it is that this person is attacking you with, and you don't like it.
As you were sharing that, I was trying to self-analyze how I feel and try to interpret it. And the first thing that came to mind is if I'm looking over the last few months, it's sort of like a feeling of, unsureness. And then I was like, okay, it sort of feels like a lack of faith in myself. There's this lack of confidence that things are going to work out okay. And
Right,
then I'm now feeling a sense of tiredness, like a tiredness from trying to stay confident, trying to stay positive. So there's this exhaustion that I guess I've been putting onto myself. And I guess maybe I just need more sleep. Maybe I need more love. So like as I'm thinking of these feelings and self-analyzing and then unpacking, am I getting closer to the root cause or am I still interpreting it completely wrong?
well, what you want to look for in particular are any projections. So you want to look for the aspects of yourself that you're projecting onto other people, and then they seem to have this feeling towards you that is actually your feeling about yourself that you projected onto them. And you can proceed the way you're talking about and get fairly close to what some of the problems are. But what you really want to look for are the areas of your own mind that you've repressed and then projected.
So I
And
guess
that's the most common thing that people do anyway.
So I guess a great example of me projecting is over the last few months, I've been posting a lot on social media, and I've had some old friends unfriend me or remove me or unfollow me.
Right,
And now I'm feeling a bit sad. I'm a bit angry. I'm now thinking that they don't like me. Maybe they're finding me annoying. They don't like the things I post. Even though I'm trying to be kind and provide value and I try to be a good person, but these people still don't like me and it hurts my sense of self. No, I feel like there's something wrong with me. I
right,
feel like I'm not worthy. I'm not
right,
liked. I'm annoying. But then I know there's amazing people that do value me, and now I'm confused.
right. Well, that's what you want to look for. And you particularly want to look for that energy that's coming at you and judging you negatively. And so you're no good. You what look at your posts, they're so stupid. And that is a kind of that represents a part of your own aggression towards them. And so you want to take that aggression back, sort of acknowledge, wait a minute, I think you guys are the idiots. And let's just face up to that. Now, the point is you want to stop feeling that they're idiots, but you can only do that if you re-own the emotion itself. And then so you'll eventually start out just full bore. You guys are fools, you're idiots, you're stupid, and you're ugly too. So there. And just really blast them with it. And as you keep doing that, you'll find it gets less and less and less the more you re-own it. And so the more you take back that aggression by realizing it's you who feel they're the idiots, and you re-own that aggression or that anger, then that is what will allow you to actually reduce that anger or that aggression because it's yours, you own it.
So if I'm angry at someone or I feel like they think I'm stupid or I'm posting some stupid random things, how do I know if that's true or not? If what I believe they believe is actually real or if I'm making it up out of thin air?
Well, the best thing is to assume that it's real. Because the simple reason is we want to get to a point where we're not judging anybody. And so the way we do that is we look for all the people we think are judging us, and we realize that in order to feel actually hurt by their judgments, we have to be supplying the hurt, because that's the only way we can hurt ourselves, is if it's actually us talking down and judging ourselves. And then as we take that back and turn it out on them and just assume that that's correct, that you do have some degree of that emotion generated about how you feel about yourself, or you wouldn't be reacting to their projections. So it has to be coming from you if you're going to actually feel beat up by it. And so the very fact that you run into people and you think, God, they hate me, or gee, they really, no, that's some little bit of yourself, and it's just a small bit, your little black heart that you've forgotten about, and you've been beating yourself up, and then you got tired of beating yourself up, so you threw it out onto other people and they started beating you up. And so you can take that back and just undo the whole mechanism.
And what's the best way to process it when you take it back? For example, I might be messaging a girl and I send her 10 messages and she doesn't reply to me, or she gets back to one of the 10 messages. Yeah. And all of a sudden now I'm like, man, I suck. I'm not likable. She doesn't like me. I'm not good looking. So I'm now thinking of all these thoughts, and I guess I'm owning it as I'm saying it out loud to you, Ken. Am I processing it?
You have a positive feeling for this woman?
Yeah, this is someone that I like spending time with.
Okay. What we always have to remember is that the real structure of the manifest world is a yin and a yang. And there's no such thing as yin without a yang. There's no such thing as love without some little degree of hate. There's no such thing as happy without some degree of depression. And so what you do, and we all do this, romantic love is a primary source of projected emotions, because we get so in love with this person, we just remember the yang, and we don't remember the yin, which is that actually I love her and she's a bit of a dork. And so I just have to remember that, and then take back that her judging you as a dork, and just realize you are judging yourself as a dork. And that's the way you want to do it. You want to remember there's always a yin and a yang. You always love, hate somebody in various proportions, but you're always producing both sides of yin and yang. And so you want to remember that, because whichever side you don't remember, you'll project.
Interesting. I'd love to get your thoughts on something. Something I've been thinking about is that when I meet, I guess, other females, other women, they either fall into a category of, okay, this person is cool and nice, and if I was lonely, maybe I would pursue to fill that hole in my heart. But I'm pretty happy on my own, so I don't really bother.
Right.
And there's sort of another category of people where there's like a 30% overlap, where there's so many similarities, so many things we align on, but there's a whole 2/3 of things that we don't align on.
Right.
But with these, I enjoy spending time with them, and I find myself falling in love as we spend more and more time together. And the initial attraction wasn't there, but over time, for some reason, now I'm infatuated with this person. I'm forgetting the 2/3 of things that we don't align on.
Right. And the fact that you're forgetting the yin is the reason that your yang is becoming stronger and stronger, because you're forgetting all the things that you don't have in common and all the things you even dislike about her. And therefore, all you've got left is, when you look inside, is, whoa, I love her. Gee, that's weird. Where did that come from? Well, it came from your forgetting the yin yang.
And then the third group, which I don't know exists, but I don't know if it's too optimistic, but maybe one day I would meet someone that totally does complete me and has the 100%, 80%, 90%. And I guess all my subconscious actions have been geared towards looking for that person. Hence, I haven't really pursued anything else. Does that person
Right.
exist? Is there a person that totally matches you?
Yeah, sure. Of course, there are people that we can get along with fairly well and fit quite well. And so the yin part is maybe just 10% of us or 20%, but it's never just zero because you can't experience yin without a yang. And so, but we always tend to forget that the more we fall in love. And we just think, no, I can't dislike this person. But the yin that you're going to remember is just, you've heard the phrase little black heart. All of us have a little black heart, which means it's a little, but it's a black heart. And that's the 10% negative that we feel under every positive that we feel. But we very easily forget the negative. Why? Because 90% of us loves the person. So I can feel even less of the yin because that's just stupid.
Wow, so that means when you find someone that has a high degree of compatibility, it's even harder to remember. It's because if I'm
That's right.
struggling with a 30% overlap, I'm gonna be completely blind if I meet someone that is like 70% overlap.
Right. That's right.
And what's the danger of being blind?
You can't see, sort of by definition.
Yeah, I love that. One other thought that's been coming up over the last year since our conversation is the word manifestation. I heard a quote from Eckhart Tolle where he talks about how people manifest incorrectly. They're always wanting things, that they want money, they want that nice car. But real manifestation is in the now, believing that you have the car, believing that you have the money. And he talks about how God or the Bible said, when you pray for something, don't pray for that you will have it, pray that you already have it. And you're rewiring your brain as you believe that you have these things in the now. What's your thoughts on this concept?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's an attempt to align with the actual realities of this world. And we've already talked about how there's only a timeless now, and you're always one with the objects that you're aware of. And whether you realize that or not, that's always the only thing that's happening. And so people have that realization to various degrees, but they rarely get it fully correct. So they'll explain it in the form that you just explained. And that's not all correct, but it's sort of on to some important truths. And so if you follow that advice, you'll get something out of it, but you won't get as much out of it as you would if you just stuck to the real realities that are involved.
Interesting. So I've been practicing going afternoon runs. I've been jogging each afternoon, and as it hurts and it's painful, I've been trying to imagine or parallel jump into a version of me where I'm a marathon runner and this is easy. And I guess mentally it soothes the pain. I tap into a different version of me that's confidently running with ease. What is happening? Am I changing? Does it still hurt? Am I ignoring the pain with a dream, or am I jumping into a different parallel universe?
Well, it seems to me like you're just starting to focus on the realities. So you're just starting to focus on your awareness of the here and now, the timeless now. And I don't know that you're actually becoming one with the object, but frequently when you get in touch with the timelessness of the now moment, you'll also get in touch with the spacelessness of the present moment, because space and time are also a yin and a yang. So that might be what's going on.
I love it, Ken. Last two questions that we always end these interviews with. One, Any recent discoveries that you've implemented to your day-to-day life?
My day-to-day life has been refined over some 50 or 60 years. I've sort of kept the things that work and jettisoned the things that don't work. So I have a fairly fixed, is a bit of a strong word, but a fairly consistent daily exercise or daily practice. And I don't vary that too much. So I haven't really introduced anything terribly new into my daily life, although I have sort of gone over all the parts of it, especially when I wrote my last book, Finding Radical Wholeness, because I have a chapter on each of the major practices: waking up, growing up, opening up, cleaning up, and showing up. And so I went through all of those in myself again. So that was new. And just made sure that I was doing them all fairly correctly.
Ken, another question I wrote down was, are there such things as mental limitations? Like if you're spending a lot of brain power to listen, to talk, to teach, to think, can the brain get worn out and you slow down, or can you simply just feel the exhaustion, feel the headache, and break past this limitation?
Are you asking this about myself or
Yourself
just
and
people in general?
I guess that's something I experience. Can I break past that? Like, can I break past the headache and the exhaustion, the brain slowing down because it's worn out, like a muscle being worn out? Is it possible for me to learn to break past that limitation and keep going and keep talking for the next 10 hours?
Well, to the extent that you incorporate all of these areas, finding radical wholeness, the extent that you're practicing waking up, that you're aware of growing up, that you're doing cleaning up, that you're doing opening up, and that you're doing showing up. All of those will reduce the wear and tear on your brain structure itself. So to the extent that you want to do something about that, just start increasing the number of practices that you do from reading, finding radical wholeness. But seriously, empirical research has showed again and again that the more of those types of things that you do, then the more strength the brain gets.
I love that. Last question, any personal goals or focus for the next 6 months, Ken?
6 months is about the amount of time I take between writing books. So a typical year for me is, because I tend to write a book a year. A typical year is I'll wake up one morning and I just go book, which means that I've now written another book, because I pre-write all my books in my head. So it only takes me a month or two to actually write them down, because I'm transcribing from my brain. And so when that process is completed and I've finished the book, I just wake up one morning and I know the book's ready, because I go book. And then I always go, oh, damn, because it means I have to get out of bed and start working. I have to sit at the computer and start typing. But that is a fairly quick process. So within a month or two, I've finished the book and I've edited it and it's all ready to go. And I just print it up out of my computer and send it into my publisher, and they always publish it, essentially just as it is. Then after, that's the first 2 months of the year. And so then I'll stop writing and I'll start reading, or just going to movies, or going on nature walks, or lifting weights, or any number of those kinds of things. I'll notice that I'm writing in my head as I do this stuff. I just sort of keep doing that and doing that. And eventually I'll complete a book. Usually It takes about 6 to 7 or 8 months. And at the end of that 8-month period, I'll wake up and go book. And that means I've got another book ready to go. And so I'll sit down and start typing it out. And that takes 1 or 2 months. And then I've got another 6 to 8 month period where I just really sort of do anything. And although it does include a lot of reading, and I usually read stuff in an area that I'm somewhat unfamiliar with, so I'm always expanding my learning. I'm right in the beginning of that 6 to 8 month period right now. So I don't really have anything planned. I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. I'll wake up, I'll get on my computer, I'll surf the web, I'll watch a movie, I'll lift weights, I'll go jogging. Could be any number of things. And I'll just keep doing that in that sort of random way until I wake up one morning 6 to 8 months from now and go book, and it'll be time to write another book. And I've done that basically my entire adult life, which is why I've written 35 books, because I do essentially a book a year. And if you subtract the 5 years I spent caretaking my wife Treya when she got cancer, that would have been another 5 books, because I took care of her for 5 years. And so that would have been 40 books. And I've been doing it for about 40 or 45 years. That's just the way I tend to operate. And I'm in that, I sort of like this period a lot, because I can do anything I want. And obviously do a fair amount of marketing of the book that I've just written. And so I'll often increase the number of these types of interviews that I accept to do. And I always enjoy them. I mean, I very much enjoy our talk today. So it's a good time of life for me.
I love that. Quick question. During that 5 years you were caretaking for Treya, I watched your movie. I don't know if it was accurately described how you had a mental block. Was it a mental block? Oh, and what could you have done differently looking back to not have a mental block and write during the caretaking period, or that's not possible?
Well, I didn't not write primarily because of the mental block. I primarily didn't write because I had a full day taking care of Treya. To take care of a cancer patient is really a full-time job. And I knew immediately when we got the diagnosis that I was going to just give up writing and take care of it. And I did that. And I don't regret a single minute of that. So.
Love that, Ken. And you talked about new areas. What's a current new area that you've been currently reading about and digging into?
I'm getting more into AI. And I also have to, because I have about 4 very large major AI companies that are sending groups here because they want to make an integral AI. They want to have an AI that develops through stages of growing up, and they want to have an AI that opens up to all of its multiple intelligences, and it goes through an opening up. And they want to have, if AI can at all get unconscious shadow material, they want a way for it to clean up, and they want it to use all the perspectives it has available to it. So they want it to show up in first person, second person, and third person. And that's not something that AI does very well right now. So I'm actually kind of studying up on AI.
Any initial thoughts about AI? Like, is it scary if the exponential learning curve keeps going, that eventually there'll be an AI that can do your job better than you, and has all the knowledge and resources in the world, and can think like you, and can continuously come up with new thoughts and can come up with your next 20 books before you come up with your next one.
I'll be totally happy with that because, I mean, face it, I'm going to die fairly soon. I mean, I am 75 years old. I mean, I've been writing constantly for at least 50 years. So if somebody comes along that can do what I can do, only better, great. I will have filled a perfectly significant space of time when there were no AI that could do it. But then I managed to get us to a point where AI can do what I do. And if it can really do what I do and do it better, I'll go out happy.
Being 75, Ken, do you imagine yourself living to 120, 100, or do you not really think about longevity, or are you confident that you can live that long?
Well, I really don't know. But for some reason, I have been interested in life extension. And life extension it's the name of a general subject. It's also the name of a large organization that makes vitamins, minerals, and all sorts of nutrients that help extend life. And they usually recommend only ones that have been tested, at least on animals and usually on human beings, and really do extend lifespan. So I didn't start, I got interested in this mostly because I was getting a doctorate in biochemistry. And this was when I was in my early 20s. I just became interested in it as a sort of a theoretical topic. And so I would take massive amounts of vitamins and minerals and nutrients and all sorts of life extending quantities. And I suppose it's helped me quite a bit because except for getting a case of chronic fatigue syndrome when I was in Lake Tahoe, Treya and I, my wife and I, moved to Lake Tahoe the year we were married. And it was just fabulous. Lake Tahoe is such a obscenely gorgeous location. It's just this huge lake that sends up bright blue rays shooting upward. It's just absolutely breathtaking. And we got a great house on the side of the hill, and we just had a wonderful time there. But there was an outbreak where we were staying in a small town called Incline Village, which is about 1,000 people. And of that 1,000 people, 300 of them came down with a case of chronic fatigue syndrome. And I was one of those 300. And that was that was a pain in the butt, needless to say. But aside from that, I really haven't had many major health issues. So I can only assume that the vitamins, minerals, and all of that have had somewhat of a beneficial help in my life. And so who knows? Maybe I'll continue to have good luck and live to be 80, 90, 100, or maybe I won't, and I'll just die at the end of this month. I really don't know. And I don't have any intuition about how long I'm going to live. I'm just theoretically deducing that all those goddamn vitamins I've shoved down my throat for 50 years is going to have some sort of positive impact. And so I might live on fairly long.
And given your self-awareness, like, can you control your cortisol level? I know that you can control your sleep. When you wake up, I guess you can probably control your REM and deep sleep. Like, are you self-aware of your muscles and the recovery? Like, do you get sick? I've heard Wim Hof can do a lot of breathing exercises and beat the viruses that scientists has given into him. Those things that you can do, and does that extend your life?
Well, yeah, a fair amount of those. I haven't specifically undertaken them because I want to extend my life. just as my taking vitamins was always sort of only vaguely because I wanted to live longer. It was mostly just, I'm interested in this as a theoretical issue. Can this really do something? So I'll end up doing some of those exercises, but not because I want to live forever.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Ken. Ken, where can people get more of you?
I think my recent book, Finding Radical Wholeness, is a very good book, and I don't hesitate in recommending it. I think it's the best book I've done. So I would recommend people start there. And then if they like my stuff, they can read. I would read the books in reverse order that I wrote them. And most of the books have a listing of at least 25. Some list all 35 of the books I've written. And just start at the top of the list and read backwards. And so you'll see how I continue to refine it over the years and hopefully make it better and better.
I love that, Ken. We'll link the new book in the description below. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you, Ken. You've helped me continue to learn and continue to keep that open mind and try pull things together from life. And I can feel the loving person you are. So thank you so much for your time, and I really, really do appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I very much enjoyed our conversation. So
Thank you so much, Ken. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Guys, if you made it this far, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully you guys got some value, and I'll see you guys next week. Peace.